OutRun is important. What started as a lighthearted driving game in 1986 became one of the most influential and well-regarded racers ever. But how do you properly follow up on something as sacred as OutRun? Is there such a thing as a perfect sequel? From pre-production to the retro game store shelf, there's a lot to talk about. So grab a snack and stick around, because today's show is all about OutRun 2. Before home consoles could push more polygons than you could count, the real spectacle lived in the arcades. Arcade technology was rapidly evolving in the 1980s, and leading the charge is none other than Sega, and the legendary Yu Suzuki. If you don't know his name, you know his games. Hang On, Space Harrier, Afterburner, Daytona USA, Virtua Fighter, and Shenmue. Suzuki and Sega AM2 were responsible for a sizable chunk of Sega's hits. Suzuki had his hands in just about everything going on at Sega, from engineering the arcade hardware his games would run on, to designing and programming the games themselves. Suzuki is a master of his craft. Among the most notable of his contributions to Sega's arcade history was the Superscaler engine, a design method in which two-dimensional sprites would be dynamically scaled in order to give the illusion of a 3D world. In an interview that seems to be lost to time, Suzuki said that he visualized and designed all of the Superscaler games in 3 dimensions, then worked them backwards into 2D so that the use of the engine would provide the sensation of being in a 3D space. Technology lends itself well to racing and driving games, and so games like Hang On, OutRun, and their sequels made their way into arcades where they'd write history. OutRun released in September of 1986, and it was unlike any driving game seen before. Everything in the game served one purpose: to give the player the sensation of driving. Not racing, but driving. There are no opponents in OutRun, and there is no Formula 1 car. It's just you, your girlfriend, the open road, and most importantly, a resale red Testarossa Spider. Select the soundtrack to your scenic drive and you're off. In a lot of racers, soundtracks just sort of exist in the background. And I'll admit that in a lot of games, I turn off the in-game music and listen to my own, either because the soundtrack isn't that great to begin with, or because I've heard Spider-Bait's cover of Ram Jam's Black Betty so often that hearing that irritating banjo riff again might finally push me over the edge. But in OutRun, the soundtrack is just as important to the experience as the driving. The object of the game is simply to drive to one of 5 destinations, picking your own route through 5 of 15 possible stages, each of which has its own unique layout and beautiful environment. The original feels simple by today's standards, but to some, that's the appeal. The gameplay, art style, and music make it worth spending an afternoon with. If you appreciate racers, you owe it to yourself to experience the original at least once. The game was recently re-released on the Switch with a host of new features, so it's a great time to check it out. OutRun was no doubt an important game, but by the early 90s, there was no need for superscaling. Suzuki's Model 1 and Model 2 boards gave way to games like Virtua Racing and Daytona USA. The true 3D racer was upon us. Outrunners, the final Superscaler OutRun game, released in 1992, the same year as Virtua Racing brought Sega into the 3D age. Then, the franchise disappeared for a bit, popping up only for the occasional home console spin-off, some of which were only tangentially related to the original. After wrapping a series of heavy hitters including Shenmue 2, Virtua Fighter 4, and Ferrari F355 Challenge, Suzuki started work on the next OutRun. In this endeavor, Suzuki faced the same sort of challenges as the people behind games like Fallout 3 and Doom 2016. These games had dedicated fan bases, unique themes, and promising ideas, but with multiple generations passing since previous entries, developers had to navigate the choppy waters of modernizing a game while staying true to the source material. For Fallout, this meant completely changing up the formula, going from a PC-focused isometric turn-based RPG to a console-focused first-person action RPG, while Doom adapted the original formula to be palatable to modern audiences, without repeating the mistakes of the divisive previous entry. The challenge of the modernization process comes largely from an explosion in scope. With falling prices of DVD media, more powerful hardware, and developed save systems, the 6th generation ushered in games that were meant to provide lengthy, personalized experiences with hours of content. Naturally, this meant that games rooted in arcade tradition had their work cut out for them. Attempts to modernize retro franchises were often controversial and rarely exceptional, with some deviating from their legacy past the point of recognition. This is a Bomberman game. Yes, really. This left Sega AM2 in a unique position. While OutRun 2 and its later versions would see extensive home and portable releases, the arcade was still the lead market. While the Superscalar engine was impressive for its day, 2D was not going to cut it in 2003, so the sequel would move to 3D. But a decade after Daytona USA pioneered the textured polygon, 3D was no longer a selling point. It was expected. With Sega unable to rely on technical dominance, OutRun would need to modify its formula to compete in a market where replayability had been replaced with longevity, without relying on persistent progression, narratives, or other elements incompatible with the pick-up-and-play nature of the arcades. AM2's answer to modernizing OutRun made only one major change to its core formula: drifting. Whereas the original saw the player commanding a Testarossa without breaking the ass end loose, OutRun 2's physics demand it. It's not difficult or realistic by any stretch of the imagination. Just flicking the steering wheel and letting off the gas is enough to initiate a drift, which is then maintained almost automatically. And it feels fantastic. Thanks to this mechanic, mastering OutRun 2 is a multi-stage learning experience. In the first stage, new players will drift just about any time they encounter a turn. Then, as the player realizes how much maintaining top speed matters, they will then stop drifting in all but the tightest turns, electing to simply lift when necessary. The third stage of mastery is where the player learns how to optimize their drifts, figuring out the right spots to initiate and end drifts to shave seconds off their time, and where they realize that drifting properly is often faster than hitting the apex. For such a simple mechanic, drifting brings depth to the sandbox the original could never hope to achieve. The main mode of play was otherwise unchanged. The player has 5 destinations to choose from, 15 unique stages creating dozens of possible paths, a time limit that would be extended at the end of each stage, and no objective other than to reach checkpoints and extend the timer. There are AI rivals that weave in and out of traffic alongside you, but they serve no purpose other than eye candy. And to ruin my speedruns. Ah, fuck. The player could choose from 8 licensed Ferrari models, 12 on the Xbox, ranging from classics like the 71 Dino GTS to the then new Enzo Ferrari. With the new cars came classes: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. These don't do anything in actuality. The cars lower down the skill ladder are just slower. It's also a bit frustrating that my favorite Ferraris from the selection, the 360 and the F50, are objectively bad choices when going for top times. I may have my gripes with OutRun 2006, but tuned versions of the cars meant that everything was a viable choice, something that might have benefited the game 2006 is based on. While the off-meta cars aren't very useful in the game's primary game type, they do find a home in the side content. Alongside the main OutRun mode came Heart Attack mode, where you complete tasks to appease your girlfriend and earn hearts, and Time Trial mode, which is largely self-explanatory. The main course is but without traffic, to allow you to go as fast as possible, uninhibited by non-Ferrari owning plebeians. In order to alleviate the content drought for the home version, the Xbox version added Missions mode, where the various challenges include tasks like driving on a certain colored part of the road, hitting all the cones of a certain color, not hitting cars, and drifting as fast as possible. These missions can get repetitive, and I have my gripes with this mode, but even after spending dozens of hours with this game and playing competitively, some of the tasks give me a run for my money. They remind me of Gran Turismo's license tests, but less likely to result in the disc being frisbeed from my balcony. Each mission rewards you with a card which you can view in the gallery. There are a lot of these, most of them pointless. These cards consist of JPEGs of various OutRun characters and Ferrari merchandise, like this Ferrari teddy bear, or these cars that aren't actually in the game. The last mission in each stage unlocked content such as more cars, music, or stages, including bonus stages from Daytona USA 2 and Scud Racer. I dove right into the OutRun mode when I picked up this game, and did not pick up Missions mode until starting to rate this video. Judging by my time with the mode, these missions and their exponentially increasing difficulty would have forced me to get better at the game to proceed. So while I might find it to be a boring grind, maybe new players can find it as a tutorial of sorts. With that said, this mode is still insultingly lazy and half-baked. I get it. In a console market that expected hours of new content, OutRun would not survive if it shipped with just its arcade game types. But this isn't the way to do it. These missions are repetitive, uninspired, and essentially just static versions of Heart Attack mode. These challenges are accompanied by the occasional street race, wherein you either drive perfectly and beat the AI with zero challenge, or make a single mistake and immediately drop into last place. This mode is undoubtedly poorly designed, but I can't think of any good ways to improve it. If this game was to come out today, we would more likely see it released as a downloadable game at a lower price point, with only the main arcade modes available. Perhaps that would have been a better business move even on the original Xbox. Critics at the time did note there was surprisingly little worthwhile content for a full-price release. Today, OutRun 2 can be had for less than a decent lunch, more than excusing its lack of side content. Speaking of lacking, OutRun 2 lacks a split-screen multiplayer mode, instead including a pass-and-play mode. Releasing in late 2004, Sega was also able to include Xbox Live functionality, not just leaderboards, but full online racing. Obviously this doesn't work anymore, but critics at the time said it was decent, with netcode that was better than most. You can still play System Link, allowing for online play through programs like X-Link Kai, but good luck finding anyone who's interested in playing it. I'm curious to see what a full lobby plays like, so if you're interested, join my Discord and we'll put something together. In spite of the lacking extra content, the core gameplay of OutRun 2 is nearly flawless. I've spent dozens of hours in this game just trying to beat my best times in OutRun and time trial mode. The drifting is rewarding, the handling is direct, the playthroughs are short, and the atmosphere is just as good as the original, something supported in spades by the soundtrack. The game received a new soundtrack that featured modern takes on the famous tracks from the original game, plus new compositions alongside it. The player could also unlock various remixes, alternate versions, and the original 1986 arcade soundtrack. Some fans don't like the direction the songs like Splash Wave went, a lot more guitar than most would have wanted, but to my ear, the various styles of the new soundtrack sound great. It's unique, and the tracks fit the game well. Magical Sound Shower is probably my favorite piece of original racing game BGM ever. It's just so jazzy and catchy. I catch my girlfriend humming it sometimes, and she's never even played the game. It's just that infectious. The remixes are pretty neat as well, even if they depart from the original soundtrack style. It's always good to have more to listen to while driving, and I happen to be quite a fan of the European techno sound these remixes went for. The two tracks with vocals are a bit of a head-scratcher, and as you'd expect, the most divisive among fans, but they're fun enough. They add a bit of variety, even if the lyrics are kinda... "15 years on, we still haven't gotten another full-fledged OutRun game, though there have been many imitations. OutRun remains a cult classic, but as with most original Xbox games, I rarely see anyone speak of the game Suzuki considered to be the most direct follow-up, and I think that's a shame. So, is OutRun 2 the perfect sequel? Kind of. If the only version of OutRun 2 we evaluated was the arcade version, it wouldn't be indefensible to call it the perfect follow-up. OutRun 2 does everything a sequel should. It embraces new technology, expands the scope of the sandbox, and brings all new content, all with a high standard of quality while capturing what made the original special. It does all these exceptionally well for an arcade title, but where calling this game perfect becomes a lot more difficult is when you take it home. When I review games, I do my best to consider them in the context of their time, and also from a modern perspective. It's hard to argue OutRun was a good deal in 2004. Priced at $50, it went toe-to-toe with Need for Speed Underground 2, Burnout 3, and Gran Turismo 4, all games with runtimes measured in the dozens of hours. From the modern perspective, consider all the reboots and sequels that have come since. Games that needlessly went open world, failed to adapt their formulas to a modern audience, fell to corporate greed, or tried so hard to fit in that they completely lost what made the original special. Looking through this lens, OutRun 2 is a golden beam of quality, a game that despite being designed nearly 20 years after the first entry in its franchise, managed to preserve every bit of the magic while creating a new and unique experience that still hasn't been fully replicated to this day. Faulting an arcade game for failing to provide a compelling career mode is like faulting John Wick for not providing a thought-provoking philosophical narrative. It was never the point. We'd see the same thing time and time again in the 7th generation, where games with incredible single-player experiences were forced to tack on online multiplayer to move copies, or the 8th, where every shooter has to have Battle Royale. The modern game is expected to have an absolutely massive scope. Smash Ultimate sports the largest character roster in its history, Cyberpunk 2077 boasts of unparalleled interactivity and player agency, and Skyrim has sold more copies than the measles vaccine. Yet, there's an elegant simplicity at OutRun 2's design that can't be ignored. The only place OutRun 2 fails is the same place it was never meant to be. While there may not be dozens of hours of unique content for the player to experience, it is, at its core, an arcade game. A game where the point is not to finish it once, but to finish it again and again, playing not to reach an arbitrary endpoint, but to constantly beat your own records or those of your friends. Longevity is well and good, but there is something to be said for a game in which the primary mode's content could be exhausted in less than 2 hours, yet has the replay value to entertain for playthrough after playthrough. And being that this is the whole point of an arcade game, I believe OutRun 2 is truly the perfect sequel, even if not a perfect game. It's 9:30 in the morning. I'd say I've been up all night working on the video, but the truth is I've been up all month working on this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave some constructive criticism down in the comments. This is the part where I'm supposed to say something about my future uploads and how I want to put stuff out more regularly, but I think actions speak louder than words in that regard. Keep an eye out. Thanks for sticking around if you made it this far, and take care.